This week, Ukraine has launched a number of successful drone attacks on Russia, with reported drone strikes at 6 locations, including Moscow. I spoke with Dr. Marina Miron, a military ethics expert from King's College London, about how these drone attacks will impact the conflict.
We don't know how many failed attacks there were. And so putting that into relation to successful attacks. So when these attacks happen, if they're successful, they are broadcasted by the media. But we don't know how many attempts to orchestrate such a complex attack Ukraine has made in order to come through and to actually strike the targets. Because the Russians, they have electromagnetic warfare systems, they have air defenses. Yes, some drones in some situations can evade air defenses, and they can penetrate the kill zones and not get shot. So the question is the quantity of the drones used for the attack. There might be enough drones used so that the air defense system is provoked, and then some drones are being shot down. Those are empty drones, not carrying any explosive charge. And then the ones that do actually get through. We have seen that these attacks have intensified when the counteroffensive had begun, the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And so when the counteroffensive began, everybody was expecting for the Ukrainian military, now trained by NATO troops, to break through the Russian defense lines and just cut the Russian forces in half. And then it didn't happen, and it didn't happen for many reasons. And I think the expectations were set way too high without understanding the reality of the war, the reality on the battlefield, and how difficult it is without air power, with a limited amount of artillery rounds to orchestrate something like that. And so the way to shift the attention away from this failure, let's put it this way, on the battlefield, it was important for Ukraine to conduct an alternative kind of strategy in order to show its capabilities. So what I think those attacks accomplish is the demonstration of Ukrainian military's will to continue this fight by whatever means they can. And we also have to think about the drone activity in the Black Sea, challenging the Russian Black Fleet. So it's a multifaceted strategy of employing uncrewed aerial and land vehicles or sea vehicles, seaborne vehicles, in order to eat away on Russia's morale, because Russia has to shift its attention. Okay, now we have to react to what is happening in the Black Sea, the Kerch Bridge, we remember that. So they have to construct defenses around that. So they have to harden their targets. And the problem is that the Russians never know where the Ukrainians will be striking. The Ukrainians have to change their launch positions. They have to change their targets in order to be effective.
According to a number of reports, Ukrainian drones attacked a Russian airfield in Pskov in the west, near the Estonian border.
That's done for obviously for the psychological effect, but also to try to degrade Russia's capability when it comes to air power. It's a zero-sum game, and it's a kind of reasoning that the Russians have been using when it comes to NATO and the United States. For instance, in space, the Russians cannot compete in space with the United States, or with NATO satellites. So what they do is they develop weapons that would degrade NATO's space capabilities or the U.S. space capabilities to the Russian level, more or less, to the level that they're comfortable with. And this is the same kind of reasoning here. It's a zero-sum game, which for Ukraine, it doesn't get more air power capability, but it tries to degrade the capabilities that Russia has. And allegedly, those fighter jets destroyed, they will not be reproduced. Besides, for Russia, under sanctions, it's difficult to get all the spare parts and so on. So in the overall picture and what Russia has at its disposal when it comes to air power capabilities, it will not make a big dent. But it's great for the Ukrainians if they can claim we destroyed 3 Russian fighter jets with cheap drones without risking any pilots, before the Russians could even deploy them. So from the informational perspective, it looks good for Ukraine.
According to reports today, Ukrainian drones attacked the western city of Kursk, with Moscow claiming to have shot down 3 enemy drones over the city.
I'm not sure about that specific attack because there is not enough information as of yet. Whether that was an actual target or whether the drone has been jammed and lost its direction and crashed into an unintended target. Similar stories we hear about the Moscow city. It would make sense for Ukraine to strike the Moscow city, especially when we consider the background. There was an Africa summit going on in St. Petersburg right after Russia pulled out of the grain deal. And so striking a symbolic target like the Moscow city, which is in the business district, is a sort of a message to Russia, right? No civilians were harmed in that attack. Now, we don't exactly know. Let's assume for a moment that the Ukrainians intended to strike the building just for demonstration purposes, that its drones can penetrate Moscow and get to the heart of Moscow, to its business district. So if we go with that version, the idea would be to inculcate fear, to show the Russians how it is to wake up in the morning from the air defense system siren and running to bunkers and not knowing whether you're going to get hit on the way. Because Russia has been targeting Kyiv as well with its missiles and drones. So that's kind of the idea, to get the people to inculcate that fear that might actually give them a reason to create more pressure on the Putin regime to say, we don't need this war. We don't, now it's affecting us. Because for up to that point, the war was in Ukraine, it's far away, and, we don't really know what's going on, but it doesn't concern us that much. And, most people, they were like the gray mass, even if they disagree with the whole idea of the so-called special military operation, they're not actively acting against it. And so they did this idea of actually instilling fear into people would bring about change. That being said, there are several problems with those attacks. The first one being Ukraine would lose a moral high ground and also create a political concern because Western countries do not want to provide long-range weapons to Ukraine. The US doesn't want to provide ATACMS to Ukraine for a reason, because there is not enough trust that the Ukrainians will not use those missiles against Russian territory.
It's unclear if Ukraine's concentration on drone attacks will remain a primary focus.
I think they might be continuing as long as they have the capacity to do so, to shift the focus away from the battlefield, to distract the Russians, to show the Western supporters that Ukraine is capable of things, that it's not money wasted and military equipment wasted when it's being sent to Ukraine, and to show the will that they're still continuing to fight despite the setbacks on the battlefield, despite everything. They're trying to use the available means that they have in order to degrade Russia's warfighting capabilities and to degrade the morale of the Russian troops, and to show how weak the Kremlin is, that it's not capable, despite all these talks about how great Russian air defenses are, to completely protect its territory. And I think the reason for using drones as well is economic, because they're cheap. A Shahed drone costs 50 times less than a Caliber missile. So that's a no-brainer. Aside from other benefits such as protecting your troops and so on and so forth, you don't have to put anybody at risk. It's a piece of metal. If it gets shot down, okay, so be it. But you're not risking human lives. It's also very cheap, and so you can sustain that pressure.